The Great War. The war to end all wars. Whatever you wish to call it, this violent, tumultuous period of human history, one thing is for certain. This was the world's first introduction to an industrialized and globally armed conflict. It brought about strange, new, and terrifying inventions, all designed for a singular purpose: kill the enemy. Horrific methods, from poisonous gases to tanks to horrific bombardment. But the fact is, it was down to the simple man on the ground to carry out the orders of his superior. Just a man, the men beside him, and their trusty rifles. The rifle, the most ubiquitous weapon of any war. The rifles of the First World War are, by today's standard, antiquated. Heavy steel and wood construction, long, unwieldy for the confines of a trench. The accuracy and power, however, cannot be denied. The British were rather innovative, as most rifles of the day were relegated to 5-shot internal magazines, cocking upon the opening of the bolt handle. The primary rifle of the British Expeditionary Force, their short magazine Lee-Enfield rifles, or SMLEs for short, could be reloaded one of two ways. First, a man could recharge the weapon via stripper clip, a small piece of steel bent to shape with rounds preloaded into it. Otherwise, he could replace the magazine. The Lee-Enfield rifle was impressive not only for its quick reloading, but also in the allowance of rapid follow-up shots due to the bolt cocking upon the closing of the rifle's action, not on the opening. This allowed for a smoother operation and subsequently an impressive drill known as the Mad Minute. This was a feat that required a soldier to fire 15 rounds in the span of 60 seconds. This drill also required a reload mid-drill. Though impressive, this was not standard practice, as the Commonwealth forces were drilled on accurate, sustained fire. The German here, not to be outdone, excelled in this concept of an accurate shot placed, arguably having been the first army to widely adopt and train a specialized role, the sniper. The German army, armed with their Gewehr 98 rifles, made life a living nightmare for the British Expeditionary Force early in the war. The Gewehr 98, designed by Paul Mauser and his brother Wilhelm, proved to be a potent, reliable, and deadly design, so much so that many modern hunting and sporting rifles still bear the Mauser-designed bolt. That design was made to be simple, rugged, and dependable. In practicality, it was idiot-proof. 2 large safety lugs at the front of the bolt served as a primary failsafe, with a third lug acting as a secondary failsafe. The bolt's massive extractor claw meant that fired rounds could be reliably and easily ejected from the weapon. This design, combining comfort, usability, and reliability, meant that it wasn't long before copies of the design became widespread, with the Italians, the Japanese, and even the Americans copying the design. One design, however, that was fairly different from the Mauser and Enfield designs was that of the Russian Mosin-Nagant rifle. The Mosin-Nagant was, for all intents and purposes, rather unremarkable. Its design only differed from that of the Mauser by the complexity of its bolt-action design. A design that, to an untrained conscript, could be difficult to maintain. The Mosin Nagant, however, proved itself in its rugged construction and nigh indestructible nature. The Mosin Nagant was a reliable rifle, with some seen combat even to this day. While rifles were the most ubiquitous and numerous firearms to exist in the First World War, the gunsmiths back on the home front were hard at work developing new and even more effective firearms to aid their men on the front, hoping that their contribution to the war would bring things to a swift, decisive end, preferably in their favor. The conditions of the war, however, provided the staging ground to put the spotlight on the king of the battlefield, the machine gun. The premier automatic machine gun of the period was that of the famous Maxim. Developed in 1883 by Hiram Maxim, this weapon proved its worth in many a war before the outbreak of World War I. So, it was an obvious choice for many countries, Germany and England among them. The Maxim spawned many derivatives, including the German MG08 and later MG08-15, the British Vickers, and the Russian PM M1910. The Maxim was easily recognized by its large sheet metal jacket around the barrel. This jacket was filled with water to keep the barrel cool, which helped to prevent it from warping under sustained fire, which, in the fields of World War I, was an all too common concern. Originally, the Maxim was chambered for 30-03, but, depending on the country who was utilizing the design, it couldn't be chambered for the American 30-06, British 303, Russian 7.62 by 54R, or German 7.92 by 57mm Mauser. With a cyclic rate of 600 rounds per minute, being fed from a 250-round canvas belt, the Maxim and its child designs proved to be a terrifying force multiplier in the battle over no man's land. The French were next to innovate, bringing along a novel concept. They would take the power and portability of a rifle and combine it with the rapidity of a machine gun, creating, in essence, the first automatic rifle, or what would be called today a light machine gun. While a lofty goal, the results were arguably less than impressive. The French Chauchat was first introduced in 1915 by the company Sidarme. The Chauchat, in concept, was amazing. A pistol grip, stock, detachable magazine, select fire, and an arguably manageable weight of 20 pounds, the Chauchat should have been a winning design. However, design problems soon reared their ugly heads. Chambered for the French 8 by 50mm rimmed Lebel cartridge, the 20-round magazine had to take on a half-moon shape. Despite this helping to prevent rim lock being the catching of one cartridge's rim in the extractor groove of the round beneath it, this made carrying multiple magazines a tough proposition. With lower quality of steel and muddy conditions of a trench, stoppages, usually after 200 to 300 rounds, were frequent. The main culprit, however, was the magazine, due to the fact that one half of the magazine had large holes cut into it, meant for an assistant gunner to observe how much ammunition was left. The only problem with that is that it attracted mud incredibly easily. In spite of the shortcomings, the Chauchat was far from the veritable hunk of scrap that myth perpetuates, but was, instead, a key stepping stone in getting increased firepower into the hands of the average soldier. No Man's Land wasn't the only area in heavy contention during the First World War. Trench raids were another front fraught with peril and hardship. Under the cover of night, soldiers ventured across No Man's Land in complete silence, doing their best to get into their enemy's trench line, to cause havoc, capture intelligence, cut lines of communication, or take prisoners. Germany took the lead in this aggressive form of warfare, emphasizing rapid, debilitating strikes. This speed, combined with confines of a trench, necessitated more firepower in a compact package. This need to arm the so-called Stoßtrupp, or stormtroopers, led to the development of the first submachine gun, the MP-18. A submachine gun is, as the name states, a sub-caliber machine gun, usually chambered in a pistol caliber. The MP-18, developed by Bergmann Waffenfabrik, was chambered in the German 9 by 19 mm Luger round. The MP-18 mounted the magazine to the left side of the receiver, causing the weapon to have a tendency to want to roll to its left. While able to utilize the standard 8-round magazine from the Luger pistol, most stormtroopers were given the 32-round Trommel magazine, or drum magazine. The compact length, 32 inches, light weight of 9 pounds, simplicity in design with its blowback operation, and a blistering rate of fire of 350 to 500 rounds per second, the MP-18 was a formidable force in any trench during World War I. While it might be expected that the submachine gun would be the king of the trenches, that's where you'd be wrong. With the United States entering into the war in April of 1917, the soldiers of the American Expeditionary Force brought with them a weapon that was never thought to be brought along into warfare: the shotgun. So effective was this weapon that even the Germans, who at the time were utilizing poisonous gases such as chlorine, bromine, and phosgene, considered this weapon too horrific and brutal, accusing the United States of war crimes. Going even a step further, German High Command threatened to execute any American soldier found to be in possession of even a single shotgun shell. The first shotguns brought along by American soldiers who, in civilian life, were trap shooters and hunters, was a modification on designs made by the companies Remington and Winchester. Of these, the most well-known was that of the Winchester Model 1897, or the so-called trench broom. Of the modifications made to the civilian model, the most prominent modifications were a perforated steel heat shield designed to prevent the user from burning their hands on the hot barrel, a reduced barrel length for use in trench fighting, and an attached bayonet lid. The most devastating quirk of this weapon comes down to its internal design. The Winchester 1897 lacks a particular part in its trigger group, known as the disconnector. The purpose of a disconnector in a firearm is to catch the hammer in the cocked position after every reset. This lack of a disconnector led to the ability to slam fire, turning the weapon into a crude automatic shotgun. By holding the trigger down and racking the slide, the weapon would discharge as soon as the action was closed. The only problem, at least early on, was that soldiers issued shotgun shells with paper hulls. In the damp confines of a trench, paper obviously would swell. This would, invariably, cause the weapon to jam. However, this was later remedied by full brass shotgun shells. In this same vein, Winchester also armed soldiers with the Model 12 shotgun. In essence, the Model 12 was an updated version of the Model 1897. The only real external differences were the lack of a hammer, as the Model 12 had an internal hammer, and a slightly longer pump grip. Otherwise, the shotgun was pretty much the same as its predecessor, even down to lacking a disconnector. Much like the Mosin Nagant, the Winchester Model 12 saw action far after its introduction, seeing combat up to the early parts of Vietnam and finally being retired in the mid-1960s. Another shotgun that saw combat during the First World War was a creation of a brilliant mind well known in the world of firearms even today. This shotgun holds the prestigious title of the first mass-produced semi-automatic shotgun in the world. This was John Moses Browning's Browning Auto 5 shotgun. The Browning Auto 5, known as such for its 5-round capacity, 4 in its tube magazine and 1 in each chamber, was designed in 1898. Initially, it was designed for 12 and 20 gauge shotgun shells. Most of these shotguns, while being designed by John Browning, were actually manufactured by the Belgian company Fabrique Nationale de Herstal, or, as it's known today, FN Herstal. Production, in Belgium at least, was halted in 1915 for obvious reasons. The Auto 5 serves as a basis for many modern hunting and sporting shotguns that are semi-automatic. Browning's design was even copied by the competing company Winchester for their Model 1911 shotguns. But due to a breakdown in the relationship between Winchester and Browning, Winchester had to figure out how to utilize certain design principles without infringing on Browning's patent. The First World War brought many strange and novel designs in the world of firearms. The nature of modern warfare forced gun manufacturers to adapt to the realities of modern war. The necessity for volume of fire, power, portability, and overwhelming force caused the world of firearms to develop rapidly, adopting designs that would blossom through the technology of World War II to the weapons that we know today. With such weapons, one can trace a thread, in some degree, back to a design from the First World War. Automatic infantry rifles, sniper rifles, machine guns, even pistols. Modern firearms were built on the backs of these imaginative, experimental designs forged in the crucible of World War I.